Tonight, we're going to look at something that shouldn't exist. A face, carved from solid bedrock staring across the Giza plateau for how long exactly? That's where things get strange, because the more we study the Sphinx, the less certain we become about when it was carved, who carved it, and why someone took the time to destroy its face. Not damage it, destroy it, deliberately, methodically, and maybe that's the real mystery. Not who built it, but who wanted it erased. Before we go further, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe the Sphinx was vandalized by chance, or was its face erased on purpose? And do you think your thoughts will align with the strange path we're about to follow in this hunt for answers? If mysteries carved in stone fascinate you, make sure to subscribe. There's so much more to uncover together. When dawn breaks over the desert, the pyramids catch the light in sharp angles. Beside them sits the Sphinx, not built block by block but revealed from the living plateau, its crouched body stretching nearly 240 feet across the sand. It should inspire a sense of permanence, yet the face startles instead of reassures. The nose is missing, the lips scarred, and the expression that once gave the guardian its identity has been stolen. The damage does not look like the work of time. Straight cuts line the stone where the nose once joined the face, marks left by chisels rather than by wind or sand. To inflict them, someone had to climb the colossus and strike again and again until the features gave way. This was no accident of nature, but an assault that demanded planning, tools, and determination. When Napoleon's expedition reached Egypt in 1798, scholars and artists sketched what they found. Their drawings of the Sphinx show the same mutilated features we see today. The nose was already gone, the mouth already broken. Whatever hands had carried out the destruction, they had acted centuries before. Arabic writers of the Middle Ages described the monument with awe and unease. They called it Abu al-Hol, the father of terror, a presence half buried in sand, silent yet commanding. To them, the Sphinx was already a ruin, its face incomplete. Even earlier, Herodotus passed over it entirely in his great histories, while Pliny the Elder gave it only the briefest mention. For such a massive figure, the silence is almost more mysterious than the damage. Legends tell of Muhammad Saim al-Dahr, a 14th century zealot who, enraged by villagers leaving offerings at the statue's feet, climbed up and struck its face. For his efforts he was executed, but his story has lingered as an explanation for the missing nose. Yet the truth is more complicated. The scars visible today belong to more than one era. The mouth, the nose, even the chin show signs of repeated attacks, as though across generations the Sphinx was struck again and again, each time with the same goal, to erase its human identity. Archaeologists have also recovered fragments of a beard once attached beneath the chin. Now housed in Cairo and London, the pieces suggest that at some point the Sphinx was altered further, fitted with additions that were later shattered and lost. Whether these belong to the original design or were imposed later, they remind us that the Guardian has never been a static image. It has been shaped and reshaped, admired and defaced, revered and mutilated. Standing before it now, the impression is undeniable. The Sphinx has endured sandstorms, floods, and centuries of neglect, but its deepest wounds were not natural. They were chosen. Its face was targeted by human hands again and again, until what once gazed out across the plateau became a silence carved in stone. Half buried in desert sands for most of its known history, the Sphinx was not always the iconic profile we see in photographs. For long stretches of time, only the head emerged from the dunes, the great paws and elongated body hidden beneath layers of drifting earth. Travellers described it as if it were rising from the ground itself, a watcher trapped between the world of the living and the silence of the past. That image haunted writers in the Middle Ages who spoke of villagers making offerings to the stone giant hoping for blessings. They imagined that the colossus could hear them, that it possessed a kind of voice. If so, it is no wonder that zealots would target its nose and mouth, striking not just at a statue but at what they believed to be the channels of speech and breath. By breaking those features, they silenced the oracle. The Guardian's mutilation seems deliberate, but what makes it more unsettling is that every culture which encountered it already found it damaged. Napoleon's scholars drew the same ruined face. Arab chroniclers called it the father of terror with its nose long gone. Earlier still, Roman writers noted its presence but gave it little weight, as though even then its true expression had already been erased. The result is a monument whose original identity no one has ever recorded. This makes the silence of Herodotus even more puzzling. His histories of Egypt linger on temples, tombs and customs, yet he did not describe the lion-bodied giant at all. Perhaps by his time, the figure's significance had already faded, its expression too disfigured to inspire the reverence it once commanded. Or perhaps its story was deliberately set aside, omitted from memory even as it stood in plain view. What fragments remain, the scars of chisels, the broken beard, the faint traces of paint once bright on its surface, suggest a monument that was once vivid and alive. Imagine the colossal face painted red, eyes outlined in dark pigment, features sharpened against the pale limestone. In that state, the Sphinx would not have looked like a ruin at all, but a living presence watching over the desert. To remove its nose, to scar its lips, would have been an act not only of destruction but of erasing its very lifelike quality. The more one looks, the clearer it becomes that the face we see is a palimpsest of erasures. Each strike of the chisel was a decision, whether born of faith, fear, or politics. Each scar is evidence of human intention layered over centuries, and what endures is not the face that was first carved, but the broken one that was left to us. That, perhaps, is the most haunting detail of all. The Sphinx is still here, crouched on the plateau, its body vast and unyielding, but the expression that once defined it is gone. Its silence is not the silence of time, but of people who chose to remove its voice. What truth was lost with that decision, what message erased along with the nose and lips, is something we may never recover. Rain leaves a signature on stone. It carves grooves and channels, slow but deep, as though the sky were writing its history in lines of water. When those patterns appear in limestone, they endure for thousands of years, testifying to climates long past. That's what makes the Sphinx so perplexing. Its body bears the scars of rainfall, and not just the occasional shower that sometimes touches the desert, but heavy, sustained downpours, the kind this region has not seen for millennia. For generations, scholars accepted that the Sphinx was carved during the reign of Khafra, a pharaoh of the 4th dynasty, around 2500 BC. The timeline sounded neat. Pyramids and Guardian, all created in one age of ambition. But when you ask what this date rests upon, the answer narrows alarmingly. It comes from a single fragment, a damaged cartouche found in a nearby temple. A broken inscription became the foundation for centuries of certainty, tying the world's most enigmatic monument to one king. Unlike the pyramids, the Sphinx wasn't built stone by stone, it was revealed from the living plateau, its vast body carved out of the bedrock itself. That difference matters. Blocks can be dated by construction methods, by quarries, by transport. But a monument cut from the earth carries its own geological record. Every storm, every climate shift, every brush of rain leaves a trace in the stone. In 1991, the geologist Robert Schoch stood before the Sphinx and noticed what archaeologists had overlooked. The deep vertical fissures running down the enclosure walls did not resemble the sharp etchings of sandblasting. They looked like the rounded channels of water, the marks left by rain falling steadily over centuries. To his eye, this was the unmistakable signature of weathering caused by rainfall, something Egypt has not known since long before the age of the pharaohs. The conclusion was radical. If the Sphinx showed the imprint of heavy rains, then its body must date to an earlier epoch, thousands of years older than Khafre. It would place the carving in an age when the Sahara was green, rivers flowed across its plains, and Neolithic peoples left petroglyphs of cattle and hunters on rocky cliffs. That would push its origin back to at least 7000 BC, perhaps even earlier, a time when, according to conventional history, no Egyptians yet built in stone. Seismic tests seemed to strengthen the case. Schoch and his team measured how sound waves travelled through the ground around the Sphinx. The results revealed deep weathering below the surface, up to 8 feet in some areas, far more than a few thousand years of desert climate could explain. The bedrock itself whispered of greater antiquity. Egyptologists reacted with anger. For them, the dating of the Sphinx is more than a technical detail. It anchors the entire chronology of the Old Kingdom. To suggest that the monument predates Khafra by thousands of years is to unravel their timeline. Some argued that the fissures could be explained by rising groundwater or by salt crystallization within the limestone. But those processes don't easily match the rounded patterns of erosion visible in the enclosure. Anyone who visits can see the paradox. The Sphinx's body is worn and rounded, carved as though by water, while its head appears sharper and better preserved. Normally the reverse would be true. The head has been exposed above the sand for millennia, while the body lay partly buried. That imbalance points to something extraordinary, that the head was reshaped at a later date, carved anew from a form that had already aged. If so, the Sphinx carries two histories in one body. Its torso may belong to an epoch of reign, while its human face reflects the ambitions of a later dynasty. The result is a monument both ancient and altered, its identity revised across ages. Such a thought reframes the Sphinx not as a single creation, but as a layered palimpsest. Rainfall etched its age into the limestone. Dynastic rulers imposed their likeness upon it. Later generations left scars of reverence and defacement. What we see now is not a frozen image from one moment in time, but a dialogue between eras, carved and recarved into the same body of stone. The deeper the investigation goes, the more contradictions rise to the surface. If the Sphinx really bears the marks of rainfall, then its origin lies in a world very different from the desert plateau we see today. Archaeology tells us the Sahara has been bone dry for 5,000 years. Geology suggests that the Guardian's body was cut during a time when storms rolled across northern Africa, when lakes spread across the desert and grasslands supported herds of animals. This climate problem sits at the centre of the debate. Egyptologists counter that flash floods, though rare, could carve similar channels. Others argue that rising groundwater may have weakened the stone from within, but these alternatives don't fully account for the sweeping rounded scoops in the enclosure walls, nor the depth of weathering detected by seismic surveys. To many eyes, the evidence still looks like the signature of long-sustained rain, and so the question follows: if the colossal lion-bodied figure is older than dynastic Egypt, who carved it? No pottery, tools, or settlements from such an early period hint at a culture capable of sculpting a monument on this scale. The people who lived along the Nile 7,000 years ago were skilled with stone tools, but they were not supposed to be quarrying bedrock and shaping creatures larger than palaces. To accept an earlier date is to accept that something about our timeline is missing. One explanation is that later rulers inherited the monument. Perhaps the Sphinx already crouched on the plateau when Khafra built his pyramid. If so, his cartouche near the site may not be a signature of authorship but of possession, a claim stamped on a legacy older than his own dynasty. Egypt's pharaohs often appropriated what came before, reshaping temples, reusing blocks, even chiseling away the names of rivals. The colossal sentinel may have been no different, a gift from the past adopted as a symbol of new kings. The imbalance between head and body strengthens that possibility. Engineers and sculptors have long pointed out that the head is too small for the torso, as though it was recarved from something larger. Around the neck, tool marks suggest stone was cut away to reshape the figure, and faint traces hint that a lion's mane once framed the shoulders. If that is true, then the monument began as a great lion, only later given a human face. Such a transformation carries symbolic weight. Lions were sacred across cultures, embodying strength and the horizon itself, the place where sun and earth meet. By recarving a lion into a human-headed guardian, later rulers may have been declaring their dominion over nature, rewriting an ancient symbol into one of political and divine power. The Sphinx in this reading is not just altered, but overwritten. The implications extend far beyond Egypt. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, circles of megaliths were raised around 9000 BC, then deliberately buried. These ruins force us to reconsider the timeline of civilization. If people then could carve stones weighing tons, why could they not also shape the plateau at Giza? The Sphinx, if older than thought, joins a growing list of anomalies suggesting that human culture was experimenting with monumental architecture long before our textbooks allow. Still, the silence of history is striking. Herodotus, meticulous in his descriptions of temples and customs, does not mention the Guardian at all. Was it buried in sand by his time? Was it considered too ancient or too damaged to matter? The absence feels deliberate, as if the figure was already slipping out of memory even as it loomed over the landscape. That silence makes the monument feel even more like a palimpsest, a body weathered by rains of an earlier age, a head recut in dynastic times, perhaps more than once, centuries of damage and restoration, erasure and reverence. Every stage left its mark, but none left the whole story. The Sphinx we see now is not one thing, but many. A lion, a pharaoh, a silence, and a scar. And if the evidence of rainfall is right, then the question is no longer simply about who carved it. It is about why its true age was forgotten. Was the memory lost naturally, buried by time and shifting sands? Or was it deliberately overwritten, its identity reshaped so thoroughly that even the greatest chroniclers of antiquity passed it by? The answers may be lost with the rains that once cut its flanks, but the questions remain etched into the stone. The Sphinx greets every visitor with a paradox. Its body is immense, a lion's form crouching nearly 240 feet across the desert, shoulders broad, paws outstretched, tail coiled along its flank. But when the gaze rises to the head, something feels off. The face is too small, the scale jarring against the massive torso. Instead of a seamless whole, the monument looks like two mismatched halves joined together. Measurements confirm the impression. In Egyptian art, proportion was no accident. Statues, reliefs, and temples were crafted with ratios that carried symbolic weight as much as visual harmony. Yet here, the ratio of head to body is wrong. Scholars who compared the dimensions concluded that the head should be nearly double its present size. Something has been reduced. Computer models have helped visualize this discrepancy. When the head is digitally enlarged, the body suddenly appears balanced, the guardian's posture flowing naturally. When left as it is, the head looks shrunken, diminished, as though carved down from something larger. This possibility is strengthened by physical evidence. Along the neck, tool marks can be seen cutting through older surfaces, narrowing the form. Around the shoulders, faint traces of what may have been a mane are smoothed away, interrupted in mid-design. Together, these clues suggest that the monument once bore a different head entirely, one erased and replaced by later sculptors. Material differences support this theory. In the 1980s, Japanese researchers ran sonic tests on the limestone. The results showed that the stone forming the head is harder and more resistant to erosion than the layers used for the torso. Normally, this might explain why the head looks sharper than the weathered body, but it also points to another scenario. If the head was carved later, the artist may have taken advantage of the tougher stone at the top of the quarry. The result would be a younger face placed atop a much older body. This paradox, ancient torso, fresher head, ties back to the geological mystery already noted by Schoch and others. The body bears the marks of heavy rains, a climate Egypt hasn't seen for thousands of years. The head shows less wear. If both had been carved at the same time, their erosion should be more consistent. The imbalance only makes sense if the face was reshaped long after the original lion form was exposed. But if the proportions are wrong and the erosion uneven, then the question becomes unavoidable. What did the Sphinx look like before? Some believe it began as a lion. That theory fits the body's anatomy, the crouching stance, and the traces of a mane. A lion would also make sense symbolically. In ancient Egypt, lions embodied power, guardianship, and the horizon. The desert was their domain, and they were linked with solar deities, protectors of the dawn. A colossal lion watching the rising sun from the east would have been a fitting sentinel of cosmic order. The human face we see today, then, could be a later imposition, a way for a pharaoh to stamp his identity on a monument too grand to ignore. The mismatch of scale, the awkward transition at the neck, the erasure of mane details, all would be the price of overwriting an older symbol. Egypt's history is full of such overwriting. Names were chiseled off temple walls, statues recarved, and monuments rededicated. To reshape stone was to reshape memory. The Sphinx may be the largest example of this tradition, a canvas of power that rulers could not resist editing. For centuries, the head was assumed to be Khafra's likeness. Statues of the pharaoh survive, showing a strong jaw, defined cheeks, and the calm gaze typical of old kingdom art. Yet forensic comparisons reveal a problem. The features of the Sphinx do not align neatly with Khafra's statues. The jaw is narrower, the proportions less defined. To some, the resemblance is too vague to be convincing. The guardian's face seems more anonymous, as though designed not to honour one king but to obscure whoever came before. That ambiguity is part of what makes the monument so haunting. Unlike other Egyptian works, it carries no inscriptions naming its creator. It speaks only through form, and that form has been altered. What we see today may not be a portrait at all, but a mask. A younger face grafted onto an older body, its original identity lost to time. Even 19th century scholars noticed the problem. Early surveys remarked on the head's disproportion, long before modern scanning confirmed it. Some described the guardian as a dwarf-headed colossus, puzzled that Egyptians known for precision could have allowed such an error. They did not yet imagine that the error was intentional, the result of centuries of recarving. When viewed in this light, the Sphinx is not just one monument, it is a layered record, an ancient lion softened by rains, later transformed into a human-headed guardian, and finally scarred by deliberate mutilation. Each stage altered its identity, and each left scars visible to us still. To stand before it is to feel that history. The paws and flanks radiate age, weathered into smooth curves. The head, though damaged, retains sharper angles. Together, they refuse to harmonize, forcing us to confront the strangeness of what survives. The monument is not balanced, but fractured. A body and a face from different times, bound together in one form. This fracture is not a flaw. It is the essence of the mystery. The Sphinx embodies contradiction, an enigma carved into limestone. Its mismatched proportions whisper of erasures, revisions and ambitions layered across centuries. It greets us not with the image of its first creators, but with the traces of all who came after, each leaving their mark upon its face. If the head we see today is smaller than it should be, then the change was not simply artistic preference, it was political. In ancient Egypt, a ruler's likeness was more than portraiture, it was presence. To carve one's face into stone was to assert dominion, to graft personal identity onto eternity. Altering the head of the great colossus was therefore more than cosmetic. It was a declaration that the monument now belonged to the living king, not to a forgotten past. This practice of rewriting identity in stone was common across dynasties. When rulers fell from favour, their names were hacked out of inscriptions. Hatshepsut's images were erased after her reign, Akhenaten's temples dismantled, Seti Thesu's cartouches recarved by rivals. Erasure was not an afterthought but a political tool, as effective as armies. The Guardian of Giza, with its vast visibility, was the greatest prize of all. To carve a new face onto its body was to seize control of the past itself. Symbolism deepens the case. In Egyptian thought, lions were associated with power, with the horizon, and with the solar cycle. Lion-headed deities like Sekhmet embodied ferocity and divine protection. Temples often place lions as guardians at gateways. A colossal lion facing east, watching the rising sun, would have embodied strength, order, and renewal. That may have been the monument's original form. By transforming it into a human-headed hybrid, later rulers announced that human authority had subsumed animal strength. The pharaoh was not merely protected by lions, he was master of them, his face carved where a mane once flowed. The idea of hybrid guardians was not unique to Egypt. Across the ancient world, cultures created composite beings to embody cosmic balance. In Mesopotamia, colossal Lamassu combined the body of a bull or lion with the head of a king and the wings of an eagle, placed at palace gates to ward off evil. In Greece, the Sphinx became a creature of riddles and destruction, a test of wit and fate. In India, tales of Narasimha told of a lion-headed avatar of Vishnu who destroyed tyranny. These parallels show a shared human impulse, to merge strength and intellect into a single guardian form. The figure at Giza may be the oldest expression of this archetype. What complicates matters is the face itself. If the monument truly depicts Khafra, why does it not match his statues more closely? Forensic experts have compared the proportions, measuring jawlines, cheekbones, and eye shapes. The results are inconsistent. Some see resemblance, Others insist the differences are too great. The lack of a definitive match has left the debate open. Other candidates have been proposed. Some suggest Djedefre, Khafra's little-known brother, who may have sought to link himself with the plateau. Others speculate that the features could represent Khufu, builder of the Great Pyramid. None of these identifications are secure. The face remains elusive, close enough to resemble royal art but far too vague to be convincing. The ambiguity has even stirred anthropological debates. Certain scholars have argued that the face bears traits more in line with Nubian or sub-Saharan features than with known Old Kingdom statues. These claims are politically charged, often dismissed as speculative, but they underline the fact that the monument's visage resists easy categorization. Whoever it was meant to resemble, the features have been softened, reshaped, and perhaps altered multiple times, leaving behind a form that hovers between specific and abstract. The dream stela of Thutmose IV, placed between the forepaws, offers a glimpse into this process. It describes the prince's dream, in which the giant, half buried in sand, promised him kingship if he restored it. After becoming pharaoh, Thutmose fulfilled the command. But restoration in Egypt was not passive. It could mean repainting, recarving, even altering proportions. The possibility that Thutmose's artisans reshaped the head is entirely plausible. If so, part of what we see today may carry his mark, not Khafra's. What makes this compelling is the pattern it suggests, a sequence of identities layered one upon another. Perhaps the figure began as a lion in deep antiquity, watching the rising sun. Perhaps it was then recarved into the likeness of a god, embodying divine presence. Later still, pharaohs may have cut their own faces into it, claiming guardianship of Giza. Each stage reduced the head further, leaving the proportions increasingly unbalanced. By the time Thutmose and his successors were done, the face had become not a portrait but a residue of many portraits, a palimpsest of erased identities. In this light, the Sphinx becomes less a monument to one age than a canvas fought over by many. Its scars are not accidents but signatures, each ruler carving away what came before. The giant crouching in the sand is therefore both ancient and new, timeless yet constantly revised. Its mismatched proportions are not flaws of design, but evidence of ambition, of hands reaching across centuries to claim what was never theirs. And this is why the Colossus feels so haunting. It does not look like a single vision preserved intact. It looks like a conversation carved into stone, with voices interrupting, contradicting, silencing each other. A lion's mane erased, a god's likeness lost, a king's face imposed, another king's tools cutting it again. Finally, zealots striking nose and lips to leave nothing but silence. Even so, despite this long history of alteration, the monument endures. Its massive body crouches as firmly as ever. Its small head, though scarred, still gazes east. The contradictions, lion and human, ancient and altered, sacred and defaced, give it power. It resists closure, remaining forever incomplete, a riddle no chisel could finally resolve. The Sphinx today is not one thing, it is many things at once: lion, god, king, ruin. Each layer of identity has been imposed and erased, yet traces of all remain. The wrong head is therefore the perfect head, because it embodies the essence of the mystery. It shows us not what the monument was, but what it has endured, and what people across ages believed was worth rewriting in stone. You can read the Sphinx's history right on its face. The most striking absence is the nose, now nothing but a hollow where rock used to extend. Legends try to fill that gap with cannon smoke and musket shots, but the surface itself refuses those stories. Across the bridge of the face you can trace straight, parallel incisions, the kind left by chisels working from multiple angles. Explosions fracture stone outward. These cuts go inward, controlled and methodical. Whoever climbed this giant meant to take that feature away and kept at it until the last wedge of limestone gave and fell. Stand close, and more wounds emerge. Around the mouth, the stone is not smoothed by time, it's faceted by tools. Some scars slice shallow and sharp, others have softened into rounded channels under centuries of weather, revealing a sequence rather than a single event. The lips, the philtrum, the edges of the nostrils, each bears a different handwriting in the rock, as if teams separated by generations returned to the same target. The pattern is hard to miss. The features that read as breath and voice were the ones repeatedly attacked. This helps explain why sculptors in later eras tried to reassert identity with additions. Fragments of a ceremonial beard were discovered beneath the chin and now rest in Cairo and London. Their surfaces show finishing different from the bedrock. The breaks reveal shallow sockets and joins, hints that the beard was affixed rather than carved in one piece. That matters. An attached element can be removed, and at some point it was, leaving jagged clues but no continuity. The image so many of us picture, a bearded guardian staring down the Nile, belongs to a phase in the monument's biography, not necessarily its birth. Colour once intensified everything. Microscopic traces of red pigment cling to protected hollows on the face, suggesting that lips and skin carried paint. Imagine the guardian in sunlight when the desert wind was still. Eyes outlined, lips vivid, skin warmed by iron oxides. The face would have looked startlingly alive. In a palette like that, chiselling away the nose and scoring the mouth wasn't just stonework. It was the stripping of a presence. Paint animates. Tools unmade that life. To gauge intent, it helps to think practically. The head rises more than 6 stories above the plateau. No one reached those features without planning. Climbers needed scaffolds or ladders, ropes, baskets for tools, perhaps even a small crew to hoist and steady. The work required patience. Chisels dull quickly on limestone, they would have needed frequent sharpening. Stroke by stroke, day after day, someone converted expression into absence. It feels less like vandalism and more like ritual labour, slow, deliberate, and aimed at changing what the stone meant to the people who saw it. Medieval Arabic chroniclers preserved the most famous name tied to this violence, Muhammad Saim al-Dar, the zealot who, enraged by villagers offering prayers at the feet of the giant, is said to have climbed the face and struck the nose. He paid with his life. Yet drawings from the French expedition centuries earlier show a profile already maimed, and some earlier texts describe a damaged visage before Saim al-Dar was born. The story fits the pattern, but not the full timeline. He may have continued a work that was already underway, a late act in a longer campaign of silencing. Silencing is the key word. Across cultures, the face is the seat of identity. Within the face, mouth and nose carry layered meanings. They are breath, voice, the threshold between inner life and outer world. In the ritual logic of iconoclasm, striking those points breaks a channel of influence. If the stone was believed to speak, cutting the lips ends its speech. If divine breath was imagined to pass, removing the nose denies its passage. That belief does not have to be ours to recognize its power. The scars make the argument in stone. The eyes tell a related story. Their outlines are worn but still assertive, suggesting that paint once gave them definition. Attacking eyes is harder. They are recessed, and their loss is less dramatic from a distance, so attention concentrated where visibility and symbolism overlapped. The mouth is the broadest canvas, the nose projects the farthest. Together they dominate the silhouette. Remove those, and even from hundreds of feet away the expression collapses. If paint once animated the features, the headdress did the opposite, locking the head into formal lines that signal rule rather than flesh. Where the headdress meets the forehead, edge damage shows later picks and patches. Some repairs soften the crisp profile, others cut new planes that misalign with older ones. These are the fingerprints of centuries of restoration, sometimes protective, sometimes interpretive, sometimes, intentionally or not, erasive. Every intervention has a style. The face carries a palimpsest of them. Look low between the forepaws and you find the stela of a king who claimed the monument spoke to him in a dream. The inscription is a royal story, but its existence confirms something ordinary. People once expected meaning from this stone. Villagers left offerings here. Pilgrims came. Rituals unfolded. Whether the rock ever spoke is beside the point. Enough people believed it might that authorities felt compelled to stop them. The most efficient way to end a cult centered on a face is to take the face. This is not unique to Egypt. Iconoclasm has a grammar. Break the nose, gouge the eyes, cut the mouth, strike the ears. The grammar repeats from Hellenistic sanctuaries to medieval churches to toppled statues in modern squares. It is not random damage. It is a program for unpersoning an image, a sequence aimed at rendering presence inert. On the plateau, the same vocabulary appears, translated into limestone and scaled to the size of a building. There is a quieter violence as well, the violence of neglect. For centuries the sand surged and fell, burying the body to the shoulders and leaving only the head to weather. When winds calmed, people returned to carve graffiti, to leave offerings, to chip at the face. When sands rose, the head was the only target left to those who wished to make a point. The desert conspired with iconoclasts to focus attention on a single surface, the one part that still seemed to look back. Modern conservators confront a difficult inheritance. Stabilize a crack and you risk erasing a trace. Clean a surface and you lighten pigments that barely survive. Leave a fracture open and water works its way in. Seal it and you alter the profile. The goal is preservation, but every choice edits the record. That is the paradox of caring for an artifact that is also a witness. The face is both object and document. Touch either and you change both. Add all of this together, chisel marks cutting inward, pigment residues clinging to shadowed sockets, sockets for a beard that once insisted on royal identity, patches from repairs that sometimes recut original planes, and a picture emerges. The damage is not noise, it is a chorus repeating a theme. Identity here was contested. It was asserted by additions and colour, denied by chisels and zeal, and complicated by well-meaning hands trying to keep the giant from falling apart. From a distance, the silhouette still commands the horizon. Up close, the story is intimate. A lip's edge replaced by a flat, a nostril's curve interrupted mid-arc, a shallow groove where a blade once danced along stone. The monument keeps its secrets, but the face does not. It tells us exactly what people did to it, and, by the precision of their blows, what they feared it could do to them. The Sphinx endures all the same. That is the final contradiction written across its features. Presence survives erasure. Breath is implied even when the channel of breath is gone. Speech is imagined even after the mouth is scored into muteness. The Guardian looks east each morning as it has for uncounted years, broken and resolute, a reminder that meaning can be attacked, altered, painted over, and still persist in the gaze of anyone willing to look long enough to read the scars. The damaged face of the Sphinx is often described in terms of loss, but those absences are themselves a kind of record. They tell us that the monument was not simply worn away by time, but deliberately targeted. When we study the patterns of mutilation closely, we can almost reconstruct the motives of the people who attacked it. Noses, mouths, and eyes have long been the focus of iconoclasts. Across cultures, when statues were struck down, these were the first features to be destroyed. The logic is consistent. To break the nose is to cut the breath. To mutilate the lips is to silence speech. To gouge the eyes is to blind the presence within. These actions were symbolic as much as physical, transforming sacred or political images into inert stone. The colossal Guardian on the Giza plateau carries exactly this grammar of destruction, scaled to monumental size. The lips are especially telling. The damage there is not a single blow, but a series of incisions, some shallow, some deep, some smoothed by weather. The sequence reveals more than one moment of attack, perhaps centuries apart. Each time the assailant struck the same area, as though obsessed with erasing its ability to speak. The mouth has become less an eroded surface than a palimpsest of violence, scar upon scar. The absence of the nose is even more dramatic. Its sheer size would have made it a dominant feature, extending several feet from the face. Removing it was no trivial act. Climbers would have needed scaffolds or ropes, chisels sharpened again and again, persistence through days of work. This was a project, not a momentary impulse. To bring down such a prominent element was to reduce the monument's humanity in an instant, transforming a lifelike profile into something uncanny and mute. Fragments of a beard, once added beneath the chin, reinforce the idea of contested identity. Their style indicates a later addition, likely meant to assert a pharaonic character. Yet this effort to humanize the figure did not last. The beard broke away, leaving only sockets and shards. In this, we glimpse a cycle: embellishment, damage, restoration, and new damage. The face has never been stable. It has always been the focus of change. Pigment traces deepen the mystery. Red particles found in protected hollows suggest that the face was once vividly painted. With eyes outlined and lips bright, the colossus would have seemed alive, a presence more than an object. To erase those features was to erase that presence. Attacks on the mouth and nose were not merely practical but theatrical, undoing the illusion of life in front of all who looked upon it. Why return to the same task over centuries? The answer lies in the power people attributed to the monument. Medieval chroniclers described it as an oracle. Villagers left offerings at its paws, believing that prayers could be answered there. If the figure could influence fate, then suppressing that power required suppressing its expression. Zealots saw in its silence the only safeguard against idolatry. Each campaign of mutilation was less about destroying stone than about controlling meaning. The scale of the face makes this persistence remarkable. Few monuments demand so much effort to alter. Every intervention required risk, labour and tools. Yet generation after generation, people chose to return, to climb, to strike. They believed something vital resided there, and they acted to remove it. Their conviction has become part of the monument's identity, written in gouges as permanent as any carving. Modern conservation reveals how complex these scars are. Some edges have been recut during restorations meant to stabilise the stone, making it difficult to distinguish ancient strikes from more recent repairs. The beard fragments themselves were pieced together from dozens of shards, showing how violently they were shattered. Every attempt to preserve or restore has also rewritten the evidence, layering modern intentions atop ancient ones. The result is a face that no longer belongs to one time but to many. Seen from afar, the broken profile defines the monument's image for the world. Up close, the details reveal centuries of conflict over what that face meant. Additions tried to assert pharaonic identity. Paint once gave life. Chisels removed that life, silencing mouth and nose. Restorers patched cracks, sometimes altering contours. What endures is not a portrait of one man, but a dialogue across millennia, a dialogue fought with tools and pigment and belief. And so the Sphinx is not simply defaced, it is remade by absence. Its broken features tell us that people feared its power enough to attack it, loved it enough to restore it, and believed in it enough to keep returning. The face today is a monument to that struggle as much as to the sculptors who first carved it. Beneath the paws of the Sphinx, machines have listened to the Earth. In the early 1990s, geophysical surveys mapped vibrations moving through the limestone. What they found startled the researchers. The ground did not echo evenly. Instead, it revealed voids, large regular cavities where solid rock should have been. To some, these looked like chambers. To others, the results were inconclusive. Yet one fact was clear. The subsoil beneath the Guardian was not uniform. Something lies below. The idea that the Colossus conceals hidden spaces is not new. Medieval Arab chroniclers described entrances leading downward, sometimes connecting to broader networks beneath the plateau. Napoleon's expedition left drawings that hinted at doorways and hollows. In the early 20th century, travellers spoke of cracks and passages exposed before restoration sealed them. The notion that the great lion-bodied figure is only the surface of a larger structure has lingered for centuries, part of its aura as both sentinel and secret keeper. When seismic surveys confirmed anomalies under the forepaws and alongside the body, speculation erupted. Could these be natural fissures carved by water? Or were they cut deliberately, part of a design that had survived unseen? To modern eyes, the shapes appeared too regular, their echoes too precise to dismiss as coincidence. Whatever they were, they demanded explanation. At the same time, alternative theories gained momentum. The American mystic Edgar Cayce had prophesied in the 1930s that a hall of records lay buried near the monument, holding the lost wisdom of a forgotten civilization. For decades, his prediction remained a fringe curiosity. But when scientific surveys revealed voids exactly where he described, his followers seized on it as validation. The idea that ancient archives lay under the paws of the Sphinx suddenly felt less like legend and more like possibility. Egyptian authorities were not eager to indulge such speculation. Officials emphasized preservation and expressed concern that drilling might destabilize the monument. Yet rumors soon circulated that tests had already been made in secret. In 1996, whispers spread of nocturnal drilling near the enclosure, with equipment lowered into cavities and then removed before morning. Nothing was published, no evidence shared. The silence only fed suspicion. Had something been found and covered up, or was the secrecy merely an effort to prevent sensationalism from spiralling out of control? The controversy grew when photographs from earlier decades resurfaced. In some images, taken in the 1920s, a metal trapdoor appears atop the head. Other photos show an opening at the rear, wide enough for a man to enter. Over time, these features disappeared, patched over with stone or sealed with mortar. Official explanations called them restorations, repairs to stabilize cracks. But for many observers, they looked more like deliberate closures. To those who had seen the photos, it was hard to believe that nothing unusual lay behind the sealed doors. Adding to the mystery are reports of water beneath the plateau. Studies of the enclosure walls show channels and erosion that suggest groundwater once flowed there. Some believe the cavities beneath the statue could be filled with silt or even waterlogged. If so, they may contain preserved materials sealed away for thousands of years. The possibility that underground chambers survived precisely because they flooded, protecting their contents from looters, has only fueled imagination. What is striking is how abruptly the research stopped. After the initial seismic surveys and the brief media frenzy they caused, permits to continue were denied. UNESCO urged caution, and Egyptian authorities restricted access. Since then, little new data has been released. The official position remains that no significant structures exist beneath the Sphinx, yet the early results, the photographs, the rumours, they continue to raise questions. For some, the explanation is simple. Preservation comes first. The Guardian is fragile, its limestone soft, its body already scarred by millennia of weather and human intervention. Any drilling risks further damage. Better to leave anomalies unexplored than to collapse the world's most famous monument. For others, the refusal looks more like avoidance. If nothing important lies below, why stop so suddenly? If the cavities are harmless, why not publish the data openly? The absence of transparency creates the very suspicions authorities sought to avoid. And so the paradox deepens. Above ground, the monument is mutilated but visible, every scar on its face a public record. Below ground, its story is obscured, hidden not only by stone but by secrecy. What the seismic instruments heard remains locked beneath paws and body, concealed as firmly as if the sand itself conspired to keep its silence. Perhaps the voids are natural, perhaps they are ancient quarries, forgotten when the blocks for nearby temples were cut. Or perhaps they are chambers, deliberately sealed long ago, holding relics of a civilization older than dynasties. The truth may never be known, because the gatekeepers of knowledge have chosen inaction. For now, the Colossus crouches over its plateau, staring east into the rising sun, while beneath it the earth keeps its secrets. The seismic results of the 1990s still hang in the air like unanswered questions. Instruments had whispered of cavities, and then silence fell. For many, that silence is the loudest mystery of all. What could be so dangerous about pursuing the truth beneath the paws of the Sphinx? Part of the answer lies in the tension between science and story. Archaeologists approach anomalies with caution, aware that natural fissures or abandoned quarries can produce similar readings. But the public imagination is not bound by such restraint. The moment those cavities were reported, people remembered Casey's prophecy of a hall of records. His vision described a library of lost knowledge, sealed away until humanity was ready. When scientific equipment confirmed voids in the exact location he named, coincidence seemed harder to claim. Whether one accepts Casey's mystical claims or not, the convergence of prophecy and data gave the idea a strange weight. Researchers asked for permission to probe deeper, to lower cameras or drill narrow cores into the anomalies. Instead, the gates closed. Officials cited preservation. International bodies supported them, and just like that, a story thousands of years in the making was left half-told. Into that void rushed rumour. Some claimed that exploration had continued in secret. Whispers circulated of late-night drilling, of instruments lowered and withdrawn, of reports that never saw daylight. Zahi Hawass, the powerful antiquities official, denied that anything unusual had been found, but his changing statements, sometimes dismissing anomalies, sometimes acknowledging them, only deepened suspicion. If nothing existed, why not say so once clearly and end the matter? Older stories complicate the issue. Medieval writers spoke of passages running beneath the plateau. Some described entering the statue itself, though their accounts are fragmentary. In the 19th century, travellers noted cracks that seemed to open into inner hollows, and those photographs from the early 20th century remain. A trapdoor on the crown, an opening near the hindquarters, both later sealed. Each generation glimpsed something, then lost it again under stone and mortar. The imagery is almost poetic. A guardian crouched above secrets, its body pierced by passages, its foundation hiding chambers. Whether those spaces are natural or artificial, they have been imagined as repositories of meaning. To some, they hold archives of a forgotten civilization. To others, they are tombs, perhaps of the builders themselves. To skeptics, they are nothing more than limestone voids. The truth is inaccessible, because no one is allowed to look. Water may hold a key to the riddle. Studies suggest that the enclosure once carried groundwater, rising and falling with the Nile. Over centuries, water might have seeped into chambers, filling them with silt, preserving whatever lay inside. Some have speculated that this explains why ancient accounts describe entrances, while today none remain open. Time may have buried them as effectively as sand. If so, what survives beneath could be sealed not only by stone but by mud hardened into rock. Modern technology could answer these questions without harm. Ground-penetrating radar, micro-drilling, fibre-optic cameras, all can probe with minimal risk. Yet permission is absent, and the official stance remains cautious. In archaeology, caution is often wisdom. But in this case, it leaves the riddle suspended, inviting suspicion. Preservation is a noble cause, but it can also be a convenient curtain. The narrative that emerges is one of duality. Above ground, the Sphinx is mutilated but known. We can walk around it, photograph it, trace every scar. Below ground, it is conjecture and silence. The monument is half visible, half hidden, a body that reveals as much as it conceals. The guardianship is not symbolic but literal, paws resting on stone, hiding chambers that no one may enter. This tension fuels every theory. Were the cavities quarries abandoned by ancient workers, the rough beginnings of temples never finished? Were they crypts for priests or kings whose names are lost? Could they be something more extraordinary? A deliberate vault of knowledge or relics preserved against time? Without exploration, all remain possibilities. And so the figure continues its watch. Tourists see the broken face, guides tell of pharaohs and dynasties, and beneath it all lies the unspoken fact that the ground is not solid. Machines once listened, and they heard echoes of hollow spaces. Whatever those spaces contain, they are now as sealed as they were when sand first buried the giant. Perhaps the most haunting thought is that answers might be only a few meters away. Beneath stone and paws, behind sealed mortar and forgotten trapdoors, something waits, or nothing at all. Either possibility is remarkable. If the chambers are empty, the world's most famous anomaly is still incomplete, carrying hidden voids in its heart. If they contain relics, then human history itself may need rewriting. For now, all we have is silence. Silence enforced by stone, by time, and by the choice not to look. The Sphinx crouches as it has for ages, its gaze turned east toward the rising sun, while below, the unanswered questions remain buried. In that silence lies both frustration and wonder, a reminder that mysteries endure not only because they are unsolved, but because someone, somewhere, has decided they must stay that way. Every time someone questions the accepted story of the Sphinx, the reaction follows a familiar path. At first, dismissal, then ridicule. Sometimes, outright hostility. It is as though the monument does not just sit on the Giza plateau, but also upon the foundations of an academic fortress, and any attempt to shift it threatens to bring the whole structure down. The roots of this defensiveness go back to the birth of Egyptology in the 19th century. European scholars, drawn by the mystery of hieroglyphs and colossal ruins, worked to place the civilization within a clear chronology. The pyramids were tied to specific kings. The colossus beside them was linked to Khafre. The neatness of that framework gave Egyptology its authority. Once carved into textbooks, it became less an interpretation than a creed. And creeds are difficult to revise. There is pride in this story too. For Egypt itself, the pyramids and their guardian are symbols of national identity. Proof that the Nile Valley was the cradle of civilization. To suggest that the Sphinx is older than Khafra is not just to adjust a date, it is to risk dethroning the dynasties as the origin point of monumental architecture. If the carving predates the pharaohs, then Egypt's claim to have been first among ancient cultures is less secure. Tourism magnifies the stakes. Millions travel each year to see the plateau. The story they are told is clear. Khufu built the Great Pyramid, Khafra built the second, and the guardian carved from bedrock was his. That narrative is repeated in guidebooks, on plaques, and in classrooms around the world. It is simple, digestible, and profitable. Entire industries rest upon it. To disrupt the timeline is to disrupt not only scholarship, but also an economy worth billions. This explains why anomalies provoke more than scholarly debate. When Robert Schoch suggested that rain erosion indicated a monument older than dynasties, the pushback was ferocious. His evidence was geological, not archaeological, and Egyptologists closed ranks. For them, to admit his interpretation was to admit that 2 centuries of certainty rested on fragile ground. Better to treat his claims as fringe, even to brand them as pseudoscience, than to risk rewriting the foundation. The same happened with John Anthony West, whose popularization of the water erosion theory made headlines. His arguments were met with laughter from some academics, irritation from others. He was granted little access to the site, his findings ignored in official channels. The message was clear: challenge the timeline, and you risk being cast outside the discipline. This pattern is not unique to Egypt. Across history, institutions have resisted evidence that threatens their frameworks. But here, the resistance is amplified by the sheer visibility of the monument. The Colossus is one of the most photographed landmarks on Earth. To admit uncertainty about its age would not just shake a footnote in academic circles, it would broadcast doubt to the world. National pride, too, sharpens the edges. In the 20th century, as Egypt gained independence and asserted its identity, the plateau became a stage for cultural sovereignty. The image of the Sphinx was emblazoned on stamps, posters, and coins. It became not only a relic of the past, but a living emblem of the nation. Any suggestion that it was not the work of the pharaohs could be seen as an affront, an attempt to diminish Egyptian heritage. In that light, defending the traditional story is as much a patriotic act as it is a scholarly one. And yet, the evidence that challenges the orthodox view continues to accumulate. Seismic surveys, geological studies, and comparative analysis all raise questions. But the reaction is rarely engagement. Instead, it is silence. Access is restricted, permits are denied, publications are dismissed. The fortress holds its ground, not with counter-evidence, but with the refusal to let questions inside its walls. Such tension creates a strange atmosphere around the plateau. Above ground, tourists walk freely, snapping photos of the broken face. Below ground, scientists know anomalies exist but are barred from further exploration. In classrooms, students learn the neat timeline, while in journals, debates simmer at the edges. And always the same cycle repeats: a claim, a burst of interest, an official denial, and a return to silence. It is worth asking why silence is chosen over transparency. If the anomalies are natural, why not publish the results and put the matter to rest? If the theories are weak, why not disprove them with evidence? Instead, questions linger, unanswered by design. The refusal itself becomes part of the mystery, feeding suspicion that there is something worth hiding. At its core, this is not only about archaeology, it is about the stories humans tell to ground themselves. The Sphinx is not just a carved guardian, it is a symbol of continuity, of order, of pride. To admit that it may be older than dynasties, or that it hides chambers still unexplored, would be to admit that the story is incomplete. And incompleteness is unsettling, especially when the world has come to rely on clarity. If the resistance to new ideas were limited to ridicule, it would be frustrating enough. But there are moments when it seems to cross into active suppression. Time and again, researchers who have raised questions about the Guardian's age or purpose have found doors closed, permits denied, photographs confiscated. Consider John Anthony West. For decades, he championed the idea that water erosion proved a monument older than dynasties. He gathered geologists, produced documentaries, and brought the question into public consciousness. Yet within academic circles, his name became shorthand for fringe speculation. Robert Schoch, who lent his geological expertise to the argument, endured similar treatment. Despite credentials and careful methods, his career was coloured by the stigma of having challenged the fortress of Egyptology. Writers like Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval experienced the same pattern. Their books reached millions, but their access to sites was restricted. The label of pseudoscientist followed them, ensuring that their ideas were dismissed rather than debated. The irony is that by branding them outsiders, institutions avoided having to confront the evidence directly. Silence and exclusion became tools of defense. Ancient inscriptions complicate the matter further. One of the most intriguing is the inventory stela, discovered in the 19th century. It describes how Khufu, builder of the Great Pyramid, repaired a temple beside the monument, implying that the figure was already ancient in his time. If authentic, this would upend the traditional timeline, yet Egyptologists dismiss it as a late fiction, a product of a much later dynasty inventing a history for itself. The reasoning may be valid, but the dismissal feels too swift. Why would Egyptians invent a tale that lessened the achievements of their own pharaohs? Why claim that Khufu restored rather than built, unless some memory lingered that the statue predated him? Modern accounts add to the sense of obfuscation. During restoration projects, workers have reported tunnels sealed, passages blocked, photographs quietly removed from circulation. Restrictions around the enclosure are strict. Access is tightly controlled, sometimes limited even for accredited scholars. Official explanations cite preservation, and preservation is indeed necessary. But the secrecy around certain areas invites speculation. When questions are met with silence, silence becomes evidence in itself. The paradox is that archaeology elsewhere has thrived on revising old narratives. Troy was once dismissed as myth until excavations proved otherwise. Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey lay buried for thousands of years until its unearthing rewrote the timeline of human culture. Stonehenge too has undergone wave after wave of reinterpretation, each time bringing it closer to understanding. These sites remind us that science advances not by clinging to creeds, but by allowing anomalies to speak. Why then should the Colossus on the plateau be different? Why should questions about its age, its erosion, its hidden chambers provoke ridicule rather than inquiry? The answer lies not in the stone itself, but in the stories we have built upon it. Once a monument becomes a symbol of identity, pride and economy, it is no longer free to change. Its meaning is managed as carefully as its structure. This management is not always malicious. In many cases, it is protective. Authorities fear that sensational claims will overshadow careful research, that speculation will harm tourism or distort history. Yet the effect is the same. Genuine anomalies are ignored, evidence is sidelined, and the questions that could expand our understanding are left unasked. The pattern is worth noticing. First, an anomaly is observed. Then, it gains attention in the press or among the public. Officials respond with firm denial, access is restricted, and finally silence falls. The cycle repeats with each new discovery, leaving us not with answers but with a sense of déjà vu. In this sense, the Sphinx is as much a monument to human politics as it is to ancient stonework. Its body carries the scars of rain and time, its face the marks of chisels, and its story the weight of narratives defended against challenge. It is a palimpsest not only of ancient recarvings, but of modern refusals, each layer telling us less about the past and more about the present. It makes you wonder what future generations will think when they study our handling of it. Will they see a culture too afraid to ask questions? Or will they see the silence itself as part of the riddle, another layer of the mystery that the Guardian was destined to embody? Perhaps that is the greatest irony. In trying to protect the story of the Colossus, we have only deepened its enigma. The unanswered questions about its age, its hidden chambers, its original form now carry as much weight as the answers would have. The Sphinx endures, not only as a monument of stone but as a monument of silence, reminding us that sometimes the most enduring truths are the ones we're not allowed to explore. As the desert cools in the first light, the Sphinx still stares eastward, unchanged in its vigil. To stand before it is to meet a question made stone, a monument both immediate in presence and distant in meaning. Its face is broken, its body scarred, yet it remains the most enduring icon of Egypt. And in those scars lies a story not of accident, but of choices. Choices made across thousands of years, choices to carve, to recarve, to mutilate and to conceal. All the evidence we have examined forms a pattern. The body, weathered by rains that fell in an age before dynasties. The head, disproportionately small, suggesting a face recut from an earlier form. Tool marks around the neck and shoulders where stone was reshaped. Fragments of a beard attached later and lost. Pigment traces revealing that the face once blazed with colour. The missing nose, not shattered by cannon fire but chiselled away with persistence. Chambers detected beneath the paws, then declared off limits. Inscriptions suggesting the monument predated Khufu, dismissed by officialdom as fiction. And at every stage, those who raised these questions faced resistance, silence, or outright hostility. The picture that emerges is not simply of a monument. It is of a record in stone of how humans deal with memory. The Guardian was born, changed, defaced, and then locked within a story that resists alteration. It was not enough to build it. It had to be overwritten. And later, it was not enough to overwrite. It had to be silenced. If the body does belong to an epoch of rains, then the monument stands as one of the oldest works of stone architecture on Earth. That alone is staggering. It would mean that long before the pyramids, long before hieroglyphs, long before even dynasties, people here were already shaping the bedrock into colossal guardians. If so, the face we see today is not the first but the last in a sequence of identities carved onto the same canvas. And if the face has been altered more than once, then what we confront is not a single image, but a palimpsest of power. Each ruler who touched it carved away a little more, leaving less of the original each time. By the end, what was once a lion or a god or something else entirely was reduced to a face too small for its body, anonymous in its features, scarred by zealots who came centuries later. The underground evidence makes the silence deeper. Instruments whisper of voids below, yet exploration is forbidden. Trapdoors once visible in old photographs are now sealed. Accounts of drilling vanish into rumour. What lies beneath may be ordinary quarries or extraordinary archives, but the truth is inaccessible. The Guardian crouches above mysteries as firmly as it crouches above sand. Its posture is not symbolic, it is literal. Then there is the academic resistance, the pattern of dismissal. When Schoch argued for water erosion, his career suffered. When West popularised the idea, he was branded fringe. Hancock and Beauval were excluded. Even when inscriptions seemed to suggest antiquity, they were waved away as fictions. Over and over the cycle repeats. Acclaim, interest, denial, silence. It is difficult not to notice the consistency. And so, the riddle is no longer just geological or archaeological, it is cultural. Why do we silence anomalies? Why do we erase faces, seal chambers, dismiss inscriptions? Perhaps the monument itself is less a mystery than a mirror. It reflects our fear of uncertainty, our need to protect stories even when evidence strains against them. Seen this way, the Sphinx becomes not only a guardian of Egypt but a guardian of human psychology. It shows us how fiercely we cling to narratives, how we mutilate the past to preserve the present, how we would rather carve away what we cannot understand than admit we do not know. Its broken face is the face of history itself, scarred, overwritten, silenced, yet still looking out across time. This is what gives it power. It is not simply old, it is contested. Every blow of a chisel, every coat of paint, every seal over a hidden passage adds to the mystery. What we see today is the sum of all those acts, a monument that tells us as much about those who altered it as about those who first carved it. Its silence is deliberate, its scars intentional, its riddle eternal. Step back from the plateau and the broken face becomes part of a larger pattern. The Sphinx is not the only monument that carries the marks of deliberate concealment. Across the world, evidence suggests that ancient structures were not merely abandoned but intentionally altered, buried, or destroyed, as though someone wanted their stories hidden from the future. Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey is a striking example. Carved around 9000 BC, its pillars bear animal reliefs and cosmic symbols, yet the site was deliberately buried under tons of soil. Whoever covered it did so carefully, preserving it through millennia. When it was rediscovered in the 1990s, it forced historians to push back the date of monumental architecture by thousands of years. Why hide it so completely? Was it an act of reverence, or an effort to obscure knowledge no longer meant to be known? Flood myths tell a similar story on a global scale. From Mesopotamia to India to the Americas, cultures remembered a time when waters rose and erased civilizations. Geological evidence of the Younger Dryas period, a sudden cooling around 12,000 years ago, accompanied by catastrophic floods, suggests those myths may hold truth. If the body of the Guardian in Giza carries rainfall scars from that era, then it stands not just as Egypt's monument, but as a survivor of a worldwide upheaval, its face overwritten while its body preserved the climate's memory. Other cultures echo the same theme of erasure. The Olmecs of Mesoamerica left colossal heads, with features sometimes mutilated. The Maya built pyramids atop older pyramids, burying the past under new stone. Even Easter Island's moai were toppled by later generations, silencing the ancestors they represented. Again and again, humanity has chosen not only to build but to bury, not only to remember but to erase. The Sphinx fits neatly into this pattern, its face deliberately destroyed, its underground secrets sealed, its story managed. And the rainfall theory pushes the stakes higher. If correct, it places the carving thousands of years before dynasties into a time when humans were not supposed to be capable of such work. It implies an advanced culture lost to history, a chapter torn from the book of civilization. This is what makes the resistance so fierce. The monument threatens the narrative of progress. It suggests we are not the first to rise to such heights, and perhaps not the last to fall. Modern parallels remind us that this instinct is not ancient alone. We topple statues when regimes change. We rename streets and cities, rewrite textbooks, curate museums to tell the stories we want remembered. History is not simply what happened. It is what survives the chisels, what escapes the flames, what is allowed to be spoken. The Guardian of Giza, mutilated yet enduring, is a mirror of this tendency. Its broken face shows us ourselves, and yet for all that has been erased, the power of the monument endures. Even scarred, even sealed, it continues to provoke awe and wonder. The gaze eastward at sunrise still feels alive, the crouching body still suggests vigilance. Its silence is not empty, it is heavy with the weight of questions unanswered. Perhaps that is the ultimate secret. The monument may never reveal its first form, the identity of its original face, or the truth of what lies below. Its purpose may not be to answer, but to endure, to remind us that not all truths are recoverable, that some mysteries are meant to remain unresolved. It will outlast us, as it outlasted those who carved it, those who recarved it, those who tried to silence it. Civilizations rise and fall, narratives are written and rewritten, but the Guardian remains, its scars speaking across ages. The most enduring lesson may not be what it once was, but how fiercely humans tried to control it, to own its meaning, to erase its identity, to bury its secrets. In that light, the riddle changes. It is not only about who built it, or when, or why its face was destroyed. It is about us, about our fear of truths too large, too disruptive, too dangerous to be allowed. The broken features stare across the desert as a reminder that memory is fragile, and that sometimes silence is imposed not by time, but by choice. The Sphinx endures, not simply as stone, but as a question. It watches the sun rise each day, a witness to millennia, its secrets buried in its body and beneath the sand. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not what it hides, but why so many across history worked so hard to make sure we would never know. Thank you for watching.